Dr. Vitada Kunnaviktikun, the Vice Rector of Chiang Mai University, Dr. Siddhinath Paputnitisan, Dean of the Faculty of Social Science, Dr. Chayan Watanaputi, and Dr. Siripon Vacharawannaku, distinguished guests. It's a pleasure to be invited to speak in this forum of International Conference on International Relations and Development 2012. Before I begin, I'm not going to talk about the social impacts because I know that I've been invited to be among social scientists, but what I'm going to talk about mostly is about the AEC and what is the real AEC, because there seems to be a lot of myths about AEC. So I want to make a clarification of this fact. And one of the reasons I'm willing to come here is that my wife graduated from this university, particularly Faculty of Science. She was in the second year, of the second group of the students of the university. Okay. One thing I like to remind you is 2 weeks ago, there was a meeting, a minister meeting in Cambodia. And it is the first time that the minister failed to issue the communique. First time in ASEAN, very important. And we have to keep this in mind. This is very important. It may have far-reaching implications for ASEAN in the future. And that has to do, the problem has to do with the balancing of power, of major power in this region. So this is one of the things that we have to keep, watching of what's going to happen. Okay. I will address 3 questions. First, are we achieving the real AEC in 2015, and how far has ASEAN moved towards economic integration? This is a fact, And then what are the challenges for AEC? First, let me give you a very brief overview of AEC 2015. I'm not going to read every slide. One of the reasons ASEAN needs the AEC is that ASEAN needs to have a kind of growth balancing strategy. In the past, we use export-oriented, most of the ASEAN countries use export-oriented strategy as a means of economic development. Now, since the Doha round coming, probably it's already failed. It's very difficult to recover Doha round. Almost impossible task. And then economic slowdown in the West. We know that the sovereign debt crisis in EU will last so many years unless Greeks and some other countries are kicked out of the EU. Then the problem may be solved quickly, much faster than at the moment. Therefore, recession will linger on for a while. And AEC will create a large single market which will boost single domestic market to replace the lost export market in the Western world. Therefore, this is why AEC is important. And in fact, AEC is part of the ASEAN community based on 3 pillars: the APSC on politics, and social and security, ASCC, and AEC. If you look at ASEAN cooperation, the pillar which is probably most successful is ASCC. Even though ASEAN is established in order to solve security problem, we can never solve security problem. Look at the war between Thailand and Cambodia. Very difficult to achieve the target, the objective of security. What is AEC? ASEAN Vision 2020 envisaged that we have, in ASEAN, a stable and prosperous and highly competitive ASEAN economic region in which there is a free flow of goods, services, investment, and freer flow of capital. I have to emphasize freer flow of capital, not free flow of capital. Still a long way from free flow of capital. And then equitable economic development and reduce poverty and socio-economic disparities by year 2012. This is in the past, which later was brought forward to 2015. And to realize the goal, the ASEAN leaders signed the Declaration of Bali Concord II, aiming at AEC in October 2003. And, oops, sorry, what happened? Okay, so this is the ASEAN Economic Community comprised of 4 strategic schedule. We aim to achieve a single market and production-based competitive economic region, equitable economic development, and integration to the global economy. So there are lists of things that we plan to do in each pillar. Then we established the blueprint in 2007. ASEAN leaders adopted the AEC blueprint, which laid out a roadmap. Very important, it laid out a roadmap to accelerate economic integration, and which included action plans, targets, and timelines to facilitate the process. So AEC blueprint is organized along 4 characteristics, as I mentioned earlier: single market and production-based, highly competitive economic region, regions of equitable economic development, and region fully integrated in global economy. Okay. Then we laid out the roadmap. The roadmap will spell out the core elements and action plan for each of the key characteristics of AEC. For example, a single market and production base comprise 5 core elements: free flow of capital, services, investment, free flow of capital, and skilled labor. Okay, and then in addition, given the scarce resources, ASEAN identified 12 resources for negotiation and monitoring of the agreements. Therefore, ASEAN identified 12 priority integration sectors for accelerated economic integration. Okay. Then this is a milestone for free flow of goods. Basically, free flow of goods come from after. This is a true free trade. It's a free trade arrangement, and this is the tariff reduction schedule for ASEAN 6. Duty free for 80% of tariff lines by 2007. Then for ASEAN 6, duty free for 100% of tariff lines, except sensitive list and highly sensitive list, which mostly are in agriculture. By that, the duty free of 100% is by 2010, and then by 2015 for the rest of ASEAN, CLMV duty free of 100%, again with the exception. Then milestone 2, free flow of services under fast. It's easier to look at this picture. Increasing equity share, for example, you increase equity share of ASEAN. For priority sector, you gradually increase the equity share of ASEAN investors from 49% in 2006 to 70% in 2010. And then for other sectors, the graph gives you the number. This is the milestone. And besides the equity shares, there are a number of milestones like complete inventory of ASEAN barrier to services. By 2008, I think this is already finished. Progressively remove other mode limitation, particularly mode 3, market access limitation. Then allow, this is very important, ASEAN always allow for flexibilities, sectoral exclusion, partial liberalization. And then the approach we adopt is liberalization through ASEAN minus X. These are important exceptions. And then we have MRA for various professional workers. Okay. And for free flow of investment, we make a transition from AIA to ACIA. And then we adopt the principle of national treatment for ASEAN investors. Now, those are some of the facts. You can read it in the document provided by ASEAN Secretariat, and I encourage you to really read carefully, to read the text carefully, because it seems to me that most of the public, most of the people who talk about AEC, they don't read the text, they don't read the agreement, and that's why I have to bring these issues today. Are we achieving the real community, real economic community? First, for trade in agriculture, ASEAN most important commodities, which are our main export, are still under sensitive list and highly sensitive list, with very high tariffs. Those commodities that are major commodities for ASEAN is rice, sugar, palm oil. Okay, Thailand is a major producer, a major exporter of rice, sugar, and sugar. And then Indonesia and Malaysia is major producer of palm oil. Vietnam is major producer of coffee. Thailand and Vietnam is major exporter of meat, chicken meat. These items, unfortunately, are under sensitive list and highly sensitive list. And yet, we've agreed that by this and that year, we're going to take these out of the sensitive list. And when the times come, we never did so. We never do so. We said, oh, okay, let us extend for a few more years. Always do that. For example, in case of rice, Philippines, has to phase out the sensitive list, phase out rice from the sensitive list. And Philippines said, oh, we can't. It's in the highly sensitive list. And then we have a meeting, and then Thailand and Philippines agreed to sign MOU that Philippines promised to buy Thai rice. This is an MOU. No enforcement mechanism. No enforcement mechanism. That's first thing. Secondly, if you look at the imports, we allow import. We say, okay, free move of agricultural products. But you look at every government, the bureaucrats, the ministers will issue regulations to regulate import. Thailand issues a long list of administrative procedures to allow import from neighboring countries. How can you have a free flow of goods when you have a myriad of regulations and rules for things, for goods that have to move across the border? For ACIA on investment on market access, we have a cap on equity share and capital requirements. And in transition from AIA, ASEAN Investment Agreement, to ACIA, Thailand added 3 agricultural subsectors into reservation or sensitive list. We backtrack. This is impossible in international agreement, and yet in ASEAN, this is ASEAN way we did it. So, for example, artificially propagated or plant breeding, we introduced this into the agreement with a foreign equity cap of 50%. This is, for example, lodging from plantation is another way, another subsector, and fishery is the third sector. The reason for backtracking is a strong opposition from people, from NGOs in particular, and some producer associations. Then another reason is that the AIA was never approved by Thai Parliament. In Thailand, you know that nowadays, if you don't act according to the constitution, you are in trouble. Government can never do anything. That's our one of the major problems with the constitution, and that's one of the reasons I think the lecture has a good and Pheu Thai party has a good rationale to revise the constitution. Okay. So I don't agree that to all the issues of revising, but this particular issue is very important. And Thailand and a few ASEAN members do not yet commit to extend non-discrimination treatment to ASEAN-based foreign investors. And we cite security and other reasons. This is very important because if we want to make ASEAN, particularly AAC, an open regionalism, we have to extend national treatment to non-ASEAN investors. And yet, we refuse to do that. And we'll see why we need to extend national treatment to non-ASEAN investors in ASEAN. Liberalization commitment in services. The background is that services is now becoming becoming the largest sector, economic sector, particularly in more developed ASEAN members, Thailand, Singapore, Malaysia. GDP share is probably more than 40%. But when we sign this agreement, we have a milestone, as you see. And you look into details, you find that it's status quo plus. I would say the agreement is able to achieve the so-called status quo plus or GATT plus. Liberalization score is only slightly. We calculate the score, the index for liberalization, and the index shows that it is only slightly higher than WTO commitments, slightly higher than what we already committed in WTO. And yet we can call it plus, because it's really plus, a small plus, Okay, so this is a score, and you can see once we calculate the score, it's slightly higher. Okay. Thailand's commitment are also lagging much behind other countries. Let's say in AFAS, in contrast to the commitment on free flow of goods, Thailand commitments in AFAS are lagging behind other ASEAN members. You look at the number in this table and you see that the number of sectors that Thailand is going to open is much, lagging behind. Number of priority, this is the old data, number of priority integration sector that can be open to foreign investors is 0. And instead, we open other subsectors which are not under the priority sector. And then we say we can, okay, because according to the rules, we can do so. You don't have to open this sector, you open this priority sector, you open other sector instead. So this is what we do. So the table shows that according to the threshold of 65 subsectors of liberalization commitments in the 7th package, now we are negotiating the 8th package. Thailand is the only country which fails to provide any commitments of the priority sector with requirement that foreign ownership is at least 51%. So Thailand has to provide commitment in other service subsectors that are not in the priority sector, so that its commitment is to satisfy the threshold of 65 subsectors. In other words, you have a blueprint, you have a scorecard, in order to satisfy the minister meeting. When minister come to the meeting, look at the number, okay, it's very satisfactory, give a press conference. In realities, those subsectors are already open to investors. So you are doing nothing. And you're telling the public, we are, achieving targets. You have to look behind these kind of things. Now, in service sector, there are 4 modes. For the first 2 modes, mode 1, cross-border ratio, cross-border trade, and mode 3 is consumption abroad. There is no restriction. That's okay. But for mode 3, commercial presence, mode 3 targeted liberalization is only partial. 70% ASEAN equity share is not 100%. And implementation is provided with flexibilities that serve to dilute the commitments, as I gave you the evidence. And mode 4 is limited to movement of professional services, not unskilled labor. And the MRA do not contain any liberalization commitments. Please do not be mistaken that MRA is liberalization. MRA is not liberalization commitment. MRA is a framework or procedure to facilitate better flows of professional services between member countries. Agreement to facilitate movement. That's it. And there is various opt-in and opt-out options which further dilute the commitment. Now, that's service sector. Financial sector is even worse. Liberalized target date delay to 2020. No specific scope of liberalization. Positive list of liberalization commitment, and most commitments are consistent with status quo regime. In other words, no major concessions among ASEAN. Banking sector remains highly protected. This is one of the reasons, for the status quo commitment. Banking sector remains highly protected in original ASEAN member countries. So AEC is not subject to dispute settlement mechanism. As a result, AEC is not binding. We don't have, you look at the WTO, it is binding because it has the dispute settlement mechanism. And as I mentioned to you, in case of Thai rice with Philippines case, we don't have this kind, we don't follow dispute settlement mechanism. Milestone need to be implemented through AFAS and yet by Singapore. Other ASEAN 6 countries have not yet complied with liberalization milestone, in particularly Thailand. And liberalization in Indonesia has been selective on geographical basis. In the Philippines, foreign equity limit of 40% is prescribed in the Constitution for transportation and telecommunications. So the assessment reveals significant backloading of commitments that may undermine the attainment of targeted liberalization in 2015. So AEC 2015 is still far from the real economic community, let alone economic integration, let alone economic community. If we talk about economic community, it will be, it has much deeper meaning than economic integration. So AEC 2015 is missed. So what is realities? What are realities? Intra-ASEAN trade share has been, more or less 20% to 25%, and there is no clear trend. Trade among ASEAN remains there. The AEC, if AEC is successful, then intra-ASEAN trade has to increase significantly. And yet it remains in the past since 1970s, 20 to 25%. ASEAN countries are major food exporters in the world, but intra-ASEAN agricultural trade share is also still low, particularly trade of our major export commodities. One of the reasons is self-sufficient policy. That's why we maintain sensitive list and highly sensitive list. And trade is mostly controlled by the state enterprises in ASEAN. And this gives you the number of the intra-ASEAN import in total imports by ASEAN on the left-hand side, and on right-hand side is the intra-ASEAN export, and you can see that the share is 20 to 25%. And there is no clear, if you look backward, no clear trend. There's no clear trend here. Okay. Now, in ASEAN, particularly in NAFTA, we have tariff preferential, because tariff in NAFTA will be reduced to 0 to 5%. 0 to 5%, not 0%. For free trade, you need to have a duty free of 0%. But in ASEAN, we still maintain 0 to 5%. And this is the tariff preferentials if you compare with the MFN rate, most favored nation rate under WTO. So we calculate the tariff preferential, the difference between WTO or MFN rate and ASEAN AFTA rate, and define that as tariff preferentials. Therefore, if trade among ASEAN countries will enjoy tariff preferential, now how much do importer and exporter exploit these, make use of this tariff preferential? Studies show that only moderate and yet increasing rate of utilization of preferential rate, and that you can see tariff preferential, the use of utilization of tariff preferential by countries for Thai export to other countries. So still very low. Reason is to make use of this tariff preferential. There is a high cost of complying with the rules of origin, and so if the cost is too high, then it's not worth, particularly in some cases where preferential is low and the cost is high, so nobody can to use the tariff preferentials. And secondly, it's a lack of information among small exporters. Another fact is investment. That's the first thing on trade. And most trade in ASEAN, trade by ASEAN is between ASEAN and non-ASEAN countries. Only 25% of our trade is intra-ASEAN trade. Investment within ASEAN, FDI. Most FDI in ASEAN also come from non-ASEAN investors. You can see, okay, this is the flow of FDI into ASEAN. And this is probably one of the most important factors, one of the very important factors affecting growth in ASEAN. You have more FDI, you have high economic growth. But then, who invests in ASEAN? You can see it's not between ASEAN and ASEAN. Most of the investment come from non-ASEAN investors. Major investors are Japan, EU, United States, Taiwan, ASEAN investment. ASEAN investor, only 16% of ASEAN FDI come from ASEAN investors. So most of investors in ASEAN are non-ASEAN investors. Now let's come back to trade again. Thanks to global production network and FDI from MNCs, multinational companies, particularly from developed countries, most of ASEAN trade is with East Asian countries, USA, Europe, and some ASEAN economies have become part of the global production network. Let's say a case of iPhone. Please do not believe that iPhone is produced in China. It's not produced in China. Okay. Now, global production network first began in clothing and electronics, and then spread to many other industries: footwear, furniture, electrical goods, machinery goods, tools, automobile, etc. This is a list of industries under global production network. Now, as time goes by, this is because of development in technology, particularly in computer technology and in ICT, which allowed the world to become to become a world factory. You spread out your production plan of parts and components in different countries, and then finally you ship the final product to consumer in developed countries. So industry have shifted away from the mature industrial economies and towards developing countries along this global production network. You look at developing country share in world network export. This is a network export for PC, parts and component, final assembly, total network. 1992, the share of part and component is 20%, increased to 47% in 2007. Final assembly also increased from 23% to 5%. So total network increased from 40% to 55%. This is the case of developing countries. Therefore, share of network production in look at the share of network of products in manufacturing, trade, part and components by country. You can see ASEAN is very important. ASEAN share of total network trade is almost 70%. In other words, trade in ASEAN is governed by global production network and investment by MNC from non-ASEAN countries, because we are part of the network already. Okay, this is on import side. Okay, so I have to go quickly. So implication is that some CLMV country can benefit by joining the network. So the challenge is to draw this country into the network. Vietnam has already joined the network. Now, trade in services, more developed ASEAN members have higher share of services in income, and this is the data we show, higher share of GDP. We do not have much data on trade in services, but the SCB research shows that there is a high economic rent in some service subsector because of the protection. Now, on Mode 3 on commercial presence, according to AEC scorecard released in March 2012, the region has fallen behind the liberalization required for free flow of services. And during phase 2 of implementation, only 13 out of 30 measures have been fully implemented. This is the details about implementation from 7 package. Now on labor movement, Mode 4, I don't have much time now, so I think I'll give the slides, and there are mostly, the labor movement are mostly governed by MRA, by sectors, and these are details about the MRA on 4 groups of professional workers, engineer, nursing services, etc. And this is basically, if you want to have a professional movement, this is what you need to comply. You have to comply to the national regulations. Then you set up ASEAN certified, ASEAN certified architect, and then you need to register. You need to get a license. Okay. So this is things on MRA, on medical profession. What do you have to do about MRA? You have to comply with these things. And implementation of MRAs, there are currently only 1 registered ASEAN professional, ASEAN charters, like ASEAN Charter professional engineers, but only 4 countries have registered. Thailand did not. Okay. So most of the migration in ASEAN is not skilled labor, it's unskilled labor. Millions of migrants, but ASEAN leaders do not want to bring this issue to ASEAN summit. It's hypocrite. And as a result, the poor workers have to suffer from several problems. This is the data on what the so-called irregular foreign workers in Thailand. Registered number, more than 1 million already. Real number is probably double. And unskilled labor so experience a lot of human rights violation. And through ASEAN member have made bilateral agreements. Foreign migrants have to incur additional under-table payment to their national officials in order to get the passport or national identification documents. In Thailand, as you know, if you are migrant from one country and you need to have an identification document, and then you went to the embassy in the morning, 4 o'clock in the morning, you will never get the quota. Next day you go 4 o'clock, you don't get the quota. Next day you go 3 o'clock, you don't get the quota. No way. Unless you pay. Once you pay, you don't have to go, and then you get the quota. So these are the problems of human rights faced by migrant workers in Thailand. Various problems, and I don't have time to talk about that. Yeah. Why are investors very enthusiastic about ASEAN, about AEC? They want to get into Myanmar, Indonesia and Vietnam thanks to new investment opportunity. They want to diversify their investment portfolio. Okay, this is really important. Most FDI and trade in ASEAN is not attracted by AEC. It's attracted by unilateral liberalization, bilateral agreements on trade and investment, and at most after. These are the facts. So economic integration arise because of, unilateral liberalization. So let me go to conclusion. ASEAN has been integrated into the global economy, particularly global production network, mainly because of unilateral liberalization and unilateral liberalization and NAFTA. And NAFTA is the most durable trade agreement in developing world, but its status is still far from the single market. Very far from. I don't have time to say about that. Research shows that trade and investment are important factors explaining growth in emerging economies. Most ASEAN trade is with countries outside ASEAN. Most FDI in ASEAN come from non-ASEAN investors. Hence, the more advanced ASEAN members become integrated with the world economy and higher growth, better living standard. And yet their growing service sector is still highly protected. And attempts to liberalize service sector are only lip service. This is the most important sector. So challenge number one, for equitable development of the less developed economies will be possible, will be achievable only if they are also integrated into the global production network. Labor-intensive industry can move that. And the more developed ASEAN members will move upward the supply chain. And the result is, division of labor and single production base. So we need to simplify rules of origin. Challenge number two is economic growth in less developed ASEAN members will be accelerated if other more developed members are willing to open their agricultural sector. We have to. Service sector challenge. The research by my colleague Dr. Duan Den conclude that liberalization in service sector still far from ambition. Implementation process is little with multiple flexibilities, some of which are opaque, that serve to undermine the realization of liberalization. Actual liberalization thus far is well behind schedule. However, very few people recognize this fact and still anticipate a massive trade and investment and movement of labor. So in the absence of political will, it will be difficult to envision an integrated ASEAN service market in the foreseeable future. Very difficult. So we have to push for service liberalization agenda forward. ASEAN Secretariat would need to demonstrate the inherent inefficiency of existing service sector and identify the obstacles to liberalization in order to understand political economy behind possible liberalization. For unskilled labor, social scientists have to assess total benefits, social costs of international migration, and propose the practical policy options for the benefits of both sending host and host countries, and in particular, the welfare of the poor migrants. This is very important. We need very good research on this. Thank you.